Okay, we're continuing with the question 4 from 2017, and I've written the equation down there beforehand. It's a miracle. Okay, so it's asking us to sketch the graph of gx with a negative slope and crossing the y-axis with at point, well, -1. And indicate all intercepts with this axis. Okay, so let's start with that. I know that, as I said, I know that the intercept here is 0, -1, so that's the first important thing. And then I also know that if I take one step in the positive direction here, I'm at the point 0, 0. Then I take, because it's a negative slope, I take one step here to the left, and then I'm at the point -1, 0. Okay. And that's sort of where this x line goes through. So that is the function g of x. And this is the function f of x, for those of you that were wondering. Okay. Again, what this, I'm going to just explain this -1 slope. That means that the change in the y-axis and the change in the x-axis, the ratio between those two is -1. Okay. So if I took one step in the positive y direction, as I did over here, I had to take one step. Let me just write positive y direction. I had to take one step in the negative x direction. Okay, so that gives me a -1. Okay, and from there, I think that's quite easy for 2 marks. Then, well, there I showed that nicely. And then let's check it out. Okay, so this was quite important also. What I just want to do is I want to move that because that's not correct. Okay, cool. So it's asking us to calculate values for the x-axis. So just to be clear, that's the x-axis running through here, right? Values for this x-axis where this function g of x and this function f of x, where their product is negative. Okay, so let's think about it a bit, and we're gonna do it step by step. So the first thing, and I've indicated it in blue over here, this blue line is corresponding to the function f of x, and this yellow line to the function g of x. Okay, so for the parabola, right, where it's gonna have negative values is sort of from these roots smaller than the negative root. Okay, but larger than the positive root, right? And again, now it's important because this 0 is included, so I can close these dots over here. Okay, so that's my 0 that I've drew in there. So here, those roots were -2 and 6, if you remember correctly from the previous video. So this is -2, and it's obviously not to scale, but that's 6. Okay, so the values therefore corresponding to this function value. So therefore, where this parabola is smaller than 0, okay, that's from and including the point 2 smaller than 2, but also including the point 6 and larger than 6. Okay, and again, I'm answering this question and dissecting it a bit into 2 pieces. So we're first just looking at this function x and corresponding x values where that would have a value smaller than 0. Okay, so I hope you all agree with me that smaller than -2 and larger than 6, as I indicated in the graph over here, those are the corresponding x values where that function f will be smaller or equal to 0. Okay, let's do the same for this function g then. That's obviously this line. And I have this point over here that I showed in the previous slide. That was -1, 0. Okay, so I know that from the point -1 onward, right? So if I draw that in here, all these values will give my, and that is -1, and including, will give my slope over here negative values. Okay. Now, two important things that I still need to mention is this. There's a section over here where these graphs don't overlap. Okay. Because now we've looked at both of them separately, and we have to now look at the product of them. So, a positive function value multiplied by a negative function value gives a negative function value. But a negative function value multiplied by a negative function value gives a positive function value. Okay, so for points, therefore, overlapping on these two number, what I call it, number lines, that's where this function is minus, that's where that function is minus or 0, smaller than 0, and that's where the gx function is 0 is over here. But where they overlap, hence this region, then we're going to have a situation where we're going to multiply two negative functions, and then they're positive again. And so that doesn't hold anymore. Okay, so those are the 2 points that I wanted to make. When two function values are multiplied, make sure that they're 0. And then there's this little section over here where they don't overlap, right? That section over there. Okay, those are the 2 things to take into account. But to answer the question, the x values is thus x smaller or equal to -2. Okay, but x values therefore larger than -1 and also equal to, larger than equal to -1. But as soon as it enters the 6th domain, what happens to it again? Well, then when they're larger than 6, their product is positive. Okay, so that's the solution. If I write that also, it can also be written like this: minus infinity, not including, that's the correct mathematical writing, but including that because it's also equal, small or equal to 0, and then -1 and to the 0.6, both including, because again it's including 0, smaller or equal to 0. Okay, and that's question number 4.